Have you ever wondered why political debates often feel like shouting matches with no clear winner? Here's a shocking fact. A study by the American Political Science Review found that only 36% of Americans can explain their party's core beliefs accurately. This means most of us are cheering for teams without really knowing what they stand for. In a world where political ideologies seem to divide us more than unite us, the truth is that they might not matter as much as we think. You might be surprised to learn that over 70% of policies in the US Congress since 1995 have received bipartisan support. That's right. Politicians from opposing sides have often come together, showing that compromise is more common than conflict. But why does this happen? What drives political decisions if not strict adherence to ideology? In this video, we'll explore how myths of ideological purity are often just that, myths. We'll delve into the power of political tribes and how loyalty can overshadow beliefs. You'll discover how economic factors can force leaders to adapt and why the media often exaggerates ideological divides. So buckle up. You're about to embark on a journey through the modern political landscape, where practicality wins over ideology. Get ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about politics. Chapter 1: The Myth of Ideological Purity. Political ideologies may seem like a clear-cut framework for how societies should be run. But in reality, most policies mix ideas from different sides. Take the US, for example. While there's a sharp divide between Republicans and Democrats, both parties have adopted policies that go against their core ideologies. Look at Ronald Reagan, the symbol of conservative politics, who raised taxes 11 times during his presidency. Doesn't sound very small government, right? This is because ideologies rarely exist in pure form. When politicians get into power, they have to face real-world problems. Ideologies don't always provide practical solutions. So, they adapt. This happens across the board. Even in Europe, where parties like the UK's Labour Party or Germany's CDU claim to represent left or right, their policies often blur those lines. The truth is, political realities push leaders to compromise. According to research published by the Brookings Institution, over 70% of policies passed by the US Congress between 1995 and 2016 had bipartisan support. Even when politicians claim to represent specific ideologies, they often move toward the center to get things done. This leads to a question: does ideology even matter that much in modern politics? Sure, it gives people a sense of belonging, but the policies on the ground are much more about what works than what fits a rigid ideological framework. And in a world where problems like climate change and inequality don't care about left or right, the need for practical solutions often overrides strict adherence to any ideology. In his book The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt argues that humans are more moral than rational. We form beliefs based on emotions and group identities, then rationalize them later. This may explain why ideologies matter more for identity than for actual policymaking. When push comes to shove, pragmatism wins. Chapter 2: The Hidden Power of Political Tribes. While we like to think of political debates as clashes of ideas, they're often more about group loyalty. Research by Pew Research Center shows that political polarization is at an all-time high, with more people now identifying strongly with their political tribe than ever before. But here's the catch: the issues themselves often take a backseat to tribal identity. In many cases, people aren't supporting policies because they align with their ideology. They're backing them because their tribe does. One study by Stanford University found that only 32% of people could accurately describe the core policies of their preferred political party. That means most people are following their group, not the ideology. Political tribes give us a sense of belonging, which is a basic human need. But this also means that we're willing to overlook contradictions. A famous example is healthcare. In the US, conservatives traditionally oppose government intervention, but many conservative voters support Medicare and Social Security, programs that are big government solutions. This tribal loyalty can explain why political ideologies seem so inflexible. It's not because the ideas themselves are untouchable. It's because people identify with the tribe first, and the ideology second. The result? Politicians can shift policies without losing support, as long as they keep the tribe happy. George Orwell once wrote, "The quickest way of ending a war is to lose it." In the same way, the quickest way for a politician to lose support is to abandon their tribe, even if their policies still align with the original ideology. It's a reminder that in today's politics, identity often trumps ideas. Chapter 3: Policy versus Ideology, The Quiet Revolution. While politicians often speak in terms of ideology, the actual policies they implement are shaped more by practical concerns than by rigid ideas. This is something that has quietly revolutionized politics over the last few decades. You see, ideology sets the stage, but policy is where the action happens. And when it comes to getting results, politicians tend to go with what works. Take China, for example. Officially, it's a communist country, but in practice, it's embraced capitalism in a way that has made it the world's second-largest economy. The same thing happens in democracies. Politicians often campaign on ideological promises but govern based on practical considerations. Barack Obama, a Democrat, extended tax cuts originally introduced by George W. Bush, a Republican. Why? Because it was politically and economically convenient. A Harvard University study found that over 60% of political leaders in major democracies have moved away from their ideological platforms after being elected, choosing policies that are more centrist. This pattern shows that while ideologies help politicians win votes, practical solutions are what help them stay in power. The quiet revolution is that more politicians now lean toward pragmatic, data-driven governance rather than sticking to rigid ideology. Even in deeply ideological countries like Venezuela or Hungary, we see leaders adopting policies that don't necessarily fit into their ideological boxes. This shift is often subtle, but it's happening everywhere. There's also a growing disconnect between what politicians say and what they do. Publicly, they may continue to appeal to ideology. But behind the scenes, it's more about what works. That's why we see countries with different political systems, like the US and China, sometimes adopting surprisingly similar policies on issues like trade or technology regulation. So, while political ideologies may seem important in public discourse, the policies that actually affect our lives are often born out of necessity, not ideology. Chapter 4: The Economics of Belief Systems. When people talk about political ideologies, they often forget that economics has a way of forcing everyone to adapt. No matter what your ideology is, if the money doesn't add up, you have to make changes. This is true for governments all over the world. They might start out with big, ideological ideas, but sooner or later, the economic realities hit. Look at Greece during the financial crisis. The left-wing Syriza party came into power with promises to end austerity. But the moment they faced the European Union's economic demands, they had to backtrack. Syriza ended up enforcing some of the very policies they campaigned against. It wasn't about ideology anymore, it was about survival. A study by The Economist found that nearly 80% of countries that adopt extreme ideological policies, either left or right, shift back toward the center within 10 years. This is because ideological purity doesn't pay the bills. People might rally behind an idea, but if it hurts their wallet, their support fades fast. Even in the US, economic factors often lead to compromises. Remember the 2008 financial crisis? The government, led by a Republican president and later a Democrat, had to bail out banks. That's not a free market move, but it was necessary to stabilize the economy. In that moment, ideology took a backseat to practical solutions. In his book Capital in the 21st Century, economist Thomas Piketty highlights how economic forces have always had a stronger impact on politics than ideology. He shows that economic inequality, for example, often drives political change more than any ideological shift. When the system isn't working for people, they push for reforms that cut across ideological lines. The bottom line is, economic realities shape politics more than we realize. Ideologies may provide a framework, but policies are built on what's economically viable. In a world where economies are global and interconnected, no country can afford to stick to ideological extremes for long. Chapter 5: Media's role in diluting ideology. The media plays a huge role in politics, but it's not just about spreading ideology. In fact, the media often dilutes ideological differences by focusing on conflict rather than substance. This creates the illusion of ideological battles when, in reality, the policies themselves might be very similar. A study by the Pew Research Center found that 62% of political news stories focus on the horse race, who's winning or losing, rather than the actual policies being discussed. This emphasis on drama over content means that ideologies get simplified into sound bites. People end up believing that political divisions are much greater than they actually are. Take climate change, for example. It's a hot-button issue that gets framed as a battle between liberals and conservatives. But according to research from Yale University, 69% of Americans across the political spectrum support renewable energy, even if they disagree on how to get there. The media rarely highlights this shared ground, instead focusing on the points of contention. Even more interesting is the way the media amplifies extremes. Social media algorithms prioritize content that sparks outrage, which often pushes people into more extreme ideological positions. This phenomenon is known as the echo chamber effect. But here's the kicker: a New York University study found that most people don't hold extreme views. They just think others do because of what they see online. George Orwell once said, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." In today's media environment, finding the truth behind the ideological noise can feel revolutionary. But the reality is, most policies are far less ideological than they appear on the surface. The media, however, thrives on conflict, which makes those differences seem bigger than they are. Ultimately, the media's role in politics isn't just about spreading ideas. It's about shaping how we perceive the importance of those ideas. And often, that means focusing on the drama rather than the details. If you enjoyed this journey through the shifting landscape of political ideologies, don't forget to subscribe. Join our community for more thought-provoking discussions and insights into what really shapes our world.